Everyone, and welcome to the College Chaps podcast. On this episode, we continue our series of talking to guests about their sporting memories. But first, with the Chaps, I'm joined by Oliver this week. How are you, sir?
Doing really well. Transfer portal. I don't know. This is probably going out Tuesday night. Transfer portal opens tomorrow, Wednesday. I think at the moment I'm the only person who isn't in the college football spring transfer portal window at this moment in time. So yes, but I am moving house. So I'm not quite sure if that counts as being on the move. Not quite the same way. No one's paying me $4 million to try and stay with their football program.
I was going to say, if you're going to ask for more money, then it's going to be a very short podcast, that's for sure. Our guest returns for a second appearance, making him a member of the exclusive Repeat Offenders Club. You know him from his column, the 40-Yard Dash, and his excellent College Football Inquirer podcast. So it's awesome to welcome back Pat Forde. Hi, Pat. Welcome. How are you?
Hello, guys. Happy to be on with you all.
It's been a while since we spoke to you. I mean, I was trying to work out. At least a couple of years ago, I think. We've had Ross on since then, but yeah, you were at least a couple of years back, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Again, I am gratified that college football can actually garner listenership across the pond with you all, and I know you follow it with great ardor and probably amusement as well at some of the stupidity that goes on. But happy to be on with you all again.
That's part of the beauty of the beautiful game, as they say. As I said at the top of the introduction, we're running a series over spring and summer of spoken to guests about their sporting memories, and we thought you would be a great guest because I don't want to in any way insult you, but you've been around the block a few times, so you know you've been to a lot of great sporting events. We'll get on to, I think, maybe wider sporting events in a second, but from a college football perspective, what are the memories that jump out for you, Pat? What are the things that make you recall fondly?
Yeah, I guess I would say I became a college football fan when probably I was 5 or 6 years old, and it was largely because A, it was on TV in our household, and B, I just thought the uniforms were fantastic. And so I started, being transfixed by Notre Dame's gold helmets and the Longhorn on the Texas helmet and what exactly was that Michigan wing victory thing, and so it all just really kind of appealed to me at a young age. And we were a big football fanatic family. I have a brother who's 12 years older than I am who went to Notre Dame, and so he kind of indoctrinated me as a Notre Dame fan about age 6. And I've just hooked ever since then. Turning it into a job was fantastic, and being able to cover the sport. And I've seen I think every national championship game from 2004 onward, and before that covered several others in various iterations. We have a playoff, we had a BCS championship, we had whatever the heck preceded that. I think the first championship, quote unquote, championship game I covered was Notre Dame, West Virginia, 1988 Fiesta Bowl, where the winner of that was, assuredly going to win the vote, and Notre Dame won that. And so, it's just kind of been something I've been around and followed fairly obsessively. I will also say, starting in third grade, I think like every Thursday picked the winners of every single college game and write them all down on paper, and then go back and see how many I got right and how many I got wrong, scores included, which was a bit ridiculous, but it was something that kind of helped also attach me to the sport. So I can give you many individual game memories if you want, but that's kind of how I got hooked.
You're originally from Colorado, is that right, Pat? So
Yes.
you mentioned Notre Dame and Michigan. What was the kind of predominant fan base up in Colorado? Because I'm assuming that Buffalo's had a following, but maybe that wasn't as a wider following as perhaps it is now.
Yeah, no, they were definitely the team in Colorado, University of Colorado. They were good when I was young, early to mid 70s. There was also, we lived in Colorado Springs, so the Air Force Academy had a bit of a following as well. But Colorado, and that was the Big 8 conference at the time, and so it was powerhouse Oklahoma, powerhouse Nebraska, and that was, back then you did not get 50 football games a weekend. You got like 2, And the Big Eight conference was the game of the week was what you got. So I watched a lot of Oklahoma and Nebraska and wishbone football, which I thought was just really cool and very fun back in the 70s.
I didn't realize until maybe 5 years ago, I spoke to some of the players at Colorado. I didn't realize the Nebraska game was such a huge rivalry game. It's a massive game, isn't it?
It was huge, absolutely. And I mean, for the longest time, Nebraska just beat the tar out of Colorado. Nebraska was just a machine that rolled through the 70s and 80s and a good part of the 90s as well. Colorado had a few blips of rebellion in there in like the late 80s, early 90s, where they won a national championship. But yeah, Bill McCartney was the coach who came in, and I mean, I think the Colorado program was a bit downtrodden at the time. He aimed high and said, nobody's wearing red in this facility because we hate Nebraska. They couldn't, they were losing 62-0 to Nebraska, but he decided we're going to go pick on the biggest kid on the block and turn that into a rivalry. And eventually they did it. And yeah, that was it was pretty heated and pretty fun to watch actually unfold.
You're now much more southern than Colorado Springs. Maybe not now. Not quite sure where you are precisely, but you moved down. You're a graduate of Missouri. Were you aware of Southeast football before you came down, or what was that like when you got down into the Southeastern Conference?
Yeah, I was, and when I went to Missouri, that was a Big Eight conference affiliation, and so Missouri was playing Colorado and Oklahoma and Nebraska, and then later it became an SEC school, and I moved actually out when I graduated from college to Louisville, Kentucky, so Southeastern Conference there. I mean, I was certainly aware of it because again, I was a fan of everything, but living it in Louisville and covering a lot of it, you get much more aware and kind of an appreciation for the incredible depth of feeling that goes with it. And if anything, it's only gotten deeper. I've lived in quote unquote SEC territory for 37 years, and the fans just continue to get crazier, which makes it all the more interesting.
Just before we move on to a broader sport topic in terms of your memories, you tugged or mentioned something there that tugs a little bit at my heartstrings, and that's how you fell in love with the game, which was the uniforms and some of those, the Notre Dame gold, the Longhorn. College football for me, the uniforms is one of the greatest things, even now as a 41-year-old man. Like, what, as you look back over your career covering the game and growing up around the game, what's the greatest college football uniform of all time?
Oh boy. I think my natural inclination is to say Michigan home uniforms. They're blue when they wore the yellow pants. They've gone now to the blue pants, which I don't like as much. But the Michigan with the winged victory helmet, the navy blue, the yellow numbers and the yellow pants is awfully hard to beat. I really like that one, especially if you combine it with the fight song when it's audio visual, and they got that great fight song, "Hail to the victors valiant." The whole thing is that's such a great sensory experience, I think. I'm trying to think what I really like the Texas whites, like the all white. Yeah. I think it's a really nice, clean look. Trying to think what other ones really spring to mind. I guess I would put those two though, Oliver, at the top of the list, and then figure out. Oh, UCLA. I've always loved the powder blue, the light blue for UCLA as well.
So they're three very traditional colours. What's your take on what Oregon do with their uniforms, with the vast array, like 30 different uniforms that they have a season?
Yeah, it's a bit much. I thought it was really obnoxious back in the day, and then you kind of become numb to it, I guess. But I understand why they did it. First of all, they are the Nike school, so they've got all the uniform money they could possibly want, and they were trying to establish an identity. And so it's like, we're just going to throw the craziest combinations and most garish shades of yellow and green out there, and people are going to be forced to acknowledge us and hate it or love it. So I get it. I've never liked really any of it, but I understand why they did it.
It's funny because the episode prior to us speaking to you, we did like an April Fool's special, and Oregon released those neon pink uniforms as an April Fool's. And we're like, to be fair, it's not really an April Fool's because you could imagine Oregon actually like rocking up and wearing those uniforms. Um, obviously, a very close affiliation throughout your life and career as a sports reporter with college football, but you're also inextricably linked with numerous other sports as well. As you look back across that broad spectrum, what are some of your favorite sporting memories of all time?
Well, I'm going to start with one that I mean is not toppable and is very personal, and that's my youngest child swimming in the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. So, like nothing, I don't care what I see. Nothing will ever top that. So that's the main thing, and that was the pandemic. That was so hard. The whole thing, just getting through that, and the 2020 games being postponed and being terrified. Oh my gosh, they're not even going to have them. And this thing she's trained for and worked for her whole life is just going to disappear into the ether. And then they rescheduled, and it was very, very hard to make the American team, and she did. And really, the Olympic trials that was the most stressful part and the most wild jubilation when she made it, because just making the team, saying I'm an Olympian, was the biggest thing. And then so you get to Paris, it's like, man, this is gravy. This is awesome. Please don't fall off the starting block. And I was one of the only parents that could be there. Nobody else, there was no family, there was no fans, which really stunk for the athletes, the amount that they were inhibited. I get it. I'm not complaining, but it was unfortunate for them. But I was so lucky. I believe there were like 8, maybe 6 American Olympians that had family members there, and all of them were coaches of some kind or another. And then there's me, sports writer. So being a sports writer paid off. My mom and dad may have wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, but one time being a sports writer paid off. So that's number one. We can go down the list from there.
Pat, just on that, because I've spoke with a lot of college football players who have had close working relationships with their parents as coaches. Guys who have come through high school with their dad as their coach, and now they're their manager, and they never stop being their coach as well. How much of a roller coaster and how difficult it is, as you say, you were there as a sports writer as well as a father. How much of a roller coaster is that journey trying to, I guess, maintain a level of objectivity in reporting, but also being dad?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. It really is, just because, I've spent my whole life basically watching sporting events with my mouth shut and an analytical eye, so to speak, of what is the story? What am I going to write? I'm not here to cheer. I'm here to, to analyze. And then your kids, and really all 3 of my kids swim in college, but they're competing, and then you just become that screaming parent. And it was a blast. I mean, it was the most fun I've ever had watching them all compete. When it came together like that at Olympic trials and at the Olympics, that was a whole other dynamic, where it was funny. Like at Olympic trials, we were in Omaha, and I had a credential to cover some stuff, but anytime my kids swam, I took it off and went over to the other side of the arena and sat with my wife and my sons to watch, and then jumped up and down and hooted and hollered and everything. But so that was kind of like literally shifting in and out of those modes then and there. And then in Tokyo, she was swimming on the 800 freestyle relay. And the thing I've always done before she swam, I would always say, yeah, let's go, rookie. And I was like, I'm sitting in press seating. There's no fans in here. I don't give a damn. I'm doing it. And I yelled it, and nobody got mad at me, which was good. And it went great, obviously. But then I went down to the mix zone interview area and got to see her there, which was really cool. Again, we're like masked and there's barriers, and it's weird, but that was still obviously a lifetime highlight.
Yeah, that's never going to change. You're right. That's never going to be beaten, to be perfectly honest. So let's take away from the family business, because you were a swimmer as well, if I'm correct. So let's take away from the family business. What other sporting highlights jump out at you, Pat?
Several. I had a list at one point of like the top 7 things I've ever covered. It's now about like 10, and they cross several different sports: football, basketball, horse racing, golf, Olympics. So just I will throw some of them out. Try to go in semi chronological order. Uh, Number one for quite a while, may still be. I don't know. It's hard to rank them, other than my kid. But 1992 Duke, Kentucky, 104, 103 overtime East Regional Final in Philadelphia. What's still pretty widely considered the greatest college basketball game ever played. Just an incredible. That was the collision of storylines there, but then the level of play was just unbelievable. Christian Laettner was the hero for Duke and made every shot he took. 10 out of 10 field goals, 10 out of 10 free throws, and made a turnaround buzzer beater in overtime to win the game. So that one, and that I will say that like took years off my life, because I was on a newspaper deadline and trying to file a coherent game story for the front page of the paper in Louisville, Kentucky, on Kentucky. After that was, that's one of the reasons sports writers drink, was especially the old newspaper deadlines. So that, football, the 43-42 Fiesta Bowl, Boise State, Oklahoma in 2007, where Boise State's last 3 scoring plays were a hook and lateral from 50 yards to get the game into overtime, then a halfback pass for an overtime touchdown, then a Statue of Liberty handoff for the winning points. And after the winning points there, Ian Johnson, the running back, actually dropped to a knee and proposed to his girlfriend, who was a cheerleader on the team. It was the most ridiculous thing. You could not make up that collision of storylines. I think it was 2 years earlier, maybe 1 year earlier, the Vince Young versus USC Rose Bowl BCS championship game, where Vince Young played on a different level than you've about ever seen anybody play. They won the game there. Let's see. Villanova, North Carolina national championship basketball game 2017. It was won on like a 30-foot shot by Chris Jenkins at the buzzer, maybe 28 feet. Tiger Woods, Pebble Beach 2000, when he won by 15 shots. And then later that same summer, Tiger Woods PGA here in Louisville against an unknown named Bob May, who just absolutely pushed him to the brink. And Tiger won that. Then horse racing, got to mention the American Pharoah Triple Crown in 2015 was incredible. I've covered horse racing since 1988 and seen like a dozen horses come close and not get it done. So to see one actually do it right there in person at the Belmont was amazing. Then Olympics, I was there when Phelps won all of 8 of his gold medals in 2008 in Beijing. Loved my time covering the Olympics in London as well, and Rio, and Tokyo, and Paris. So anyway, that's an off the top of my head list there.
Just quickly go back to basketball, because you mentioned Christian Laettner, who you obviously managed to see in person. Have you been able to see any of Cooper Flagg this year?
Oh, yeah.
And how do they compare, Pat? Is Flagg as good as people say he is?
Yes, I think he is, and I think he'll be a better NBA player than Laettner was. Laettner was an all-time great college player. I mean, he was absolutely outstanding. His record speaks for itself. I'm not sure why still to this day he didn't transfer a little better to the NBA. His game might have been a little too far ahead of what the NBA was doing, where he'd be great in this NBA, where you can be more away from the basket as a big person and shoot from the outside and handle and all that sort of thing. Flagg, he will definitely be the number 1 pick in the draft. I've been debating with some people. Some people think he's going to be, a 12-year pro who's just a good pro. I think he's got a chance to be a star. I do. He's so good at everything. I think the counterpoint is, what's he great at? What is he, can he score 30 a game? I don't know. Can he, what exactly is he going to be? But I would draft him number one, and I'd be prepared to have probably a 10-year All-Star.
Wow, fantastic. You've just rhymed off 10 of maybe the greatest sporting events that anyone could be at, and you've been at countless other games on the sidelines or on the field or whatever. What's the best atmosphere that you've experienced at a sporting event?
Ooh, that's a good one. And you know what? It immediately made me think of a football game that I forgot to mention. And I would say that was the Kick Six Auburn, Alabama Iron Bowl in 2013, where that was Auburn. They've now changed it, which is sad. But the press box used to be open air. Like there were no windows. So you could put them up afterwards, but they had them open during games.
Mm-hmm.
And the noise that accompanied that return for the winning touchdown was like the most percussive thing I've ever felt. It was just unbelievable how loud it was as people figured out what was happening. And I remember, again, violating press protocol for sure. But again, it was so loud, nobody was going to hear me. Standing up in the press box and spreading my arms wide when he was at like the 30 and saying, he's going to score, because there was nobody around him. And you could just see it from up there. And just for the way that game, was already a great game. And for it to end like that was just unbelievable. And then, the depth of feeling that goes into Auburn, Alabama. I know you guys have studied this. There's no rivalry quite as heated as that one. And so for Auburn to beat Alabama that way was just, preposterous. And I do remember then, after it happened, and you're stunned, and I'm trying to make my way down these ramps to get down to interview people. There was an Auburn fan wearing, the blue and orange overalls, and he's got a pom-pom, and he was skipping along by himself. He's like 40 years old. He's skipping along like a little child. Like this is the happiest day of his entire life. And that's how much it meant to Auburn.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've been around and actively involved in some of the great sporting moments, and you just said then. But what is, just to finish us off tonight, what is a sporting memory that not necessarily you were there at in person, you might have been, that was so important, groundbreaking? We all have an event where you remember exactly where you were when it happened because it was so instrumental and groundbreaking and sport defining. What's that one moment for you that you'll never forget exactly where you were when that happened?
Yeah, gosh, I could give you so many of them. I'm trying to think from like a historic import. I would say probably Jack Nicklaus winning his last Masters in 1986. And I was a student at Missouri, and we were, probably your fairly classic American family where we tuned in for major golf events, but my dad loved the Masters. And, he loved Jack Nicklaus. That was his favorite golfer. So that became my favorite golfer. It was just kind of handed down. And at that point, 1986, you kind of think you're not going to see him do anything anymore. And for him to win, and I, got on the phone from my dorm room at the University of Missouri and called home collect. I was like, Dad, can you believe it? And just having that conversation was incredibly meaningful, to have seen that happen and be able to talk to my dad about it, even though we weren't in the same place. That was really cool. That comes to mind. But gosh, I mean, so many football games. I grew up a Bronco fan, and the first time they won the Super Bowl and watching that, actually I was in Lexington, Kentucky. And then I was at the second one when they won the next year when they beat the Falcons. And being at that game, that was really cool. And also a challenge to press box professionalism.
At least you're honest about it, Pat. Listen, we could talk for hours, but we don't have time. I did want to pick your brains just very quickly. The Iamaleava situation at Tennessee, just a couple of minutes on your thoughts on, because it's got repercussions for the game, and the game is changing, as we know over the last 2 years, 3 years, the game is changing out with all recognition. This seems to be another stepping stone. What do you make of it all?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it really could be a watershed moment. It may not be, but it feels like kind of a tipping point in terms of A, who has the power, but B, like, what are the repercussions for athletes who pull this crass of a power play? I think he's going to lose money. I think he's going to lose fan support and popularity. And I don't know where he's going to go next. I frankly, I think there are no winners in this. You know, the young man is not winning. Whoever's advising him, his father, his agent, they're not winning. They look bad in this. Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, and I wrote about this, the irony, the karmic boomerang, if you will. You know, the state of Tennessee and the attorney general and all those fans empowered Nico Iamaleava to make all the money he could make by enjoining the NCAA and going to court so they couldn't enforce their rules that led him to getting that contract. Well, reap what you sow, man. Here comes the rules now that there's no rules, and this kid feels like he can do whatever he wants to get money. He's going to hold you up. And so Tennessee loses. The collective there thought they had outsmarted everybody. They lose. Iamaleava loses. And yes, the basic, like, who's in charge? Where's the power? The institutional power versus the athletic power, I think, is now thrown up for grabs. And we'll see what happens out of it. But, you know, the transfer portal opens. We're taping this on Tuesday afternoon. Transfer portal opens on Wednesday. What's going to be the market for him? And who wants to expend a lot of money for somebody who may or may not really give a damn about anything other than making money?
You make a great point there. And I don't think it's something that everyone really appreciates. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of embellishing that a little bit, this is such a rare situation where a Power Four. This isn't a backup quarterback at a Power Four program. This isn't a Group of Five starter who is looking for a Power Four opportunity. This is a Power Four starter who, right now in the spring transfer portal, doesn't have a lot of options to play Power Four starting football next year. How can you just kind of sum up how, I don't know, cataclysmic, how massive that whole situation is?
Yeah, it is. I mean, yes, we're talking about a guy who was a starting quarterback in the playoffs last year, who, you know, his team could be top 10 to start this year. And I really think he went in saying, they need me, so I can basically hold them for ransom here. And I think Tennessee shot back and said, you know what? You were pretty good last year, but you weren't transformative. The main reason we were good was our defense. And we're just not going to we're not going to be held hostage like this. So it is huge. It's seismic. Can Tennessee go get a different quarterback, or do they just got to go with what they got? Where does Nico end up? He can't transfer within the SEC. The rules state that after February 1st, you cannot intra-conference transfer there. And I'm glad somebody still has a rule on something. But then, yeah, what's the pool of other schools that are A, have the money, and B, the willingness to go out and get him? There's a few, we'll see, but already I think he's probably figured out that he overplayed his hand, because several potential landing spots have been like, nope, we don't want him. So it is a wild, wild development for sure.
Yeah, it's caught all the headlines this last week. That's all the time we've got for this, and we really do appreciate you taking your time. I mentioned at the start how busy a guy you are, Pat. What keeps you busy at this time of year? What have you got coming up that our listeners can watch out for, and where can they find you?
Yeah, Kentucky Derby coming up here in 2.5 weeks in Louisville. So I get a home game here. It'll be my 38th Kentucky Derby, I think. So I'm, looking forward to doing some work on that. I've got a fun NFL draft story coming out later this week on Travis Hunter. I think people will enjoy, kind of a different one. Going to be keeping an eye on the transfer portal. And then once we get past the Derby, it's kind of Triple Crown season. I'll be doing a lot of horse racing there and just waiting for the latest weird thing to happen in college sports. Awesome. So SI.com, Sports Illustrated, would be the place to find me.
Thank you so much. That's all from us. Thanks to Pat and Ollie for their awesome input. Thanks to you for listening, and thanks for continuing to support us. Stay safe and well, and catch you all next time.